Minister Bonilla, Daniel Kerner here greets you. Thank you very much for joining this panel. It is truly a pleasure. We are here in Sao Paulo with a room full of people and interested in listening to your perspective from Colombia, and especially given everything that is going on in the world. What do we have to expect from the Colombian economy in the next months or years? Thank you very much. This is a hard question. Well, today we have a country that, like everyone else in Latin America, is experiencing an economic deceleration. And no one has made an accurate prediction about the deceleration, and we are working so that the deceleration has the least impact in Colombia and we can move quickly to a new path of growth. In the expectation, that's something that we can do. The basic principle is to maintain tax stability and comply with the tax rule that is mentioned in Colombian, which is the case is to maintain the tax stability and work to reduce the current deficit and the tax deficit. While to maintain the tax rule, we need to balance the deficit of the full price stabilization fund that was frozen, prices that were frozen by the government in 2020, 2021. Thank you very much. And thinking a little bit about the global context, which is why we are here today, and the great changes that we have occurred in the energy part, climate change, and the reconversion of the value chain. How do we evaluate the opportunities that open up to Colombia in this international contest? There are opportunities that not only open up to Colombia, but to all of Latin America. We are in the peak in which countries have to start making adjustments towards the medium term to guarantee their energy transition. We must all, in general, make the substitution in the area of mobility of fossil fuels towards clean energy. This means that the product apparatus of all Latin America countries must to begin abandon the assembly of gasoline vehicles and diesel vehicles to start building hybrids and electric vehicles. In the perspective is from now on, at some point, as Europe already done, by 2040, countries will stop the registration of new fossil vehicles. And from now on, the vehicles will be all electric. Mobility will continue to develop to the world. We all humans have to keep moving, both in mass transport as well as individual transport. And in that process, in mass transport, as we, Colombia, must begin to prioritize electric rail transport, metro in cities, and the recovery of rail networks in the country to build other types of mobilities. And individual transport, we must move from fossil fuels vehicles to electric vehicles. Thank you very much. And thinking a little bit more about the political process, President Petro's government had some reforms, some already has been approved. What can you tell us about what to expect from the reforms that has been presented in the future, especially the health, pensions, and other reforms, but perhaps other reforms that might come out? How do you see the coming months or years? The next period of sessions, the debate will continue to develop in the second jurisdiction, both the pension reform as well as the health reform. Both go to plenaries. The health reforms go to the plenary, and the House go to plenary of the state. In both cases, there are defensive process where surely we have to work on. There are some issues that we essentially interest the government. In the case of health, the interest is to consolidate the preventive health in the primary care in the territory, which means that we build and organize the system in such a way that citizens in any corner of the country have access to clear diagnosis process, to some laboratories, to some medication system, pharmacy systems, and to medical interventions, perhaps specialists or not. We depend on the condition and characters of the diagnosis of each person, which means minor surgical intervention or major surgical intervention, or simply a preventive monitoring of certain types of diseases that we can that can be chronic in the long term. In this sense, what we want to consolidate primary care is health. And the biggest question is why, after 30 years of the reform, that is Law 100, we did not manage to consolidate this type of care in the Colombia territory. And today, we begin to ask why people do not have clarity about the medical diagnosis, pharmacy diagnosis, personal health diagnosis. And they only have some precisions about when they have an accident, but not about their life, which is something that we want to build. In the case of the pensions, we are going to a second debate. And in the second debate, which is clear in Colombia, is that we are going to abandon the arbitration system between the pensions care funds and the co-pensions, which is the primary care system. And what has been raised in the first debate is that in this elimination of arbitration, we build a system of pillars. A pillar is already authorized in the 3 minimum salaries, so the average income and the capitalization funds. This allows the system to eliminate the escape of people who have been given themselves in the last 10 years from the private funds to patients, and the withdrawal of money without order allowed to organize it and to know how to improve the management of the numbers. And given the current political context, do you think they're going to be approved this year? How do you evaluate the possibility of approval of the reforms, and how changed they can ended up being? The process of discussion on the second period of the sessions that begins on July 20th implies that before this, the government tries to build a new coalition of government, and that it arrives prepared with the new conditions to face this type of debate. In reality, what we have done today is a process of attempt not to discuss, and that is what happened at the end of the previous period of sessions. The attempts were not to discuss. If you organize to a new coalition, we will reach a process where the reforms are discussed thoroughly and the national debate predominates any other interest. And is there any other reform? The labor is reform was archived, but do you think there is any other reform that is in government programs, or there any other one that's on focus right now? The labor reform that is archived, but the curiosity of the labor reform is that the international agreements are still in force in Colombia, signed both with the United States and with the countries of the OSCE and with the OIT, to make Colombia a country where the decent work system predominates, where all Colombians who work have a clearly defined and where freedom of organization. All these enforced with the ones that have been signed with international organizations. The only thing that labor reform was saying is, hey, let's make this a reality in Colombia, and we have to bring it to a reform. Let's make it a reality. We should be able to have this with clarity with the rules in force. And here the question is why Colombians like to sign international agreements, and when they ask us to comply, we say why you were messing with us. The truth is that we want to sign agreements, we comply. Thank you very much. And the final question, you already mentioned something, but the issue of climate change has been a priority for President Petro, and it has also been to reduce the importance of hydrocarbon sector in the Colombian economy, but is still an important sector. So how do we think about this transition from the dependence on hydrocarbons in the fiscal and external terms to a neo-Colombian, and how soon can it happen? There are three transitions that need to be developed simultaneously. The first is the issue that in the Colombian foreign trade, there's too much dependence today on the exports of oil and coal, and are not going to resolve that the dependency is 1 or 2 years, but by building a new exportable supply for which we have to consider that this transition takes 20 to 25 years, where we have to production of other types of goods that go to export market, and with which we replace today's oil and coal income. That is the most important transition. And for that, the idea is to reindustrialize the country, consolidate, recover the manufacturing industries, the pharmacy industries, and consolidate the metal mechanic, which is today the most important in any country in the world, to develop the production of capital goods and sustainable consumption goods, which are the products that we most import. Simultaneously is to develop the sector of smart services and deepen agriculture and agro-industry. That is the first transition. The second transition is to reduce the dependence that we have on taxes revenues of the derivatives that comes from hydrocarbons, but we can only obtain that with a more diverse that generates that other types of economy sectors begin to make important tributations in Colombia. There are two elements. Then the energy transition in Colombia itself, it is to replace in the mobility sector to consumption that today is essentially of hydrocarbons, to a process in which we incorporate less polluting fuels, vehicles powered by gas, vehicles powered by biofuels, to build the future automotive park that is electric. Thank you very much, Minister. We have no much time, but thank you very much. I know that everyone has received it with a great interest, and as always, we are here at your disposal to continue the dialogue between investors and us. Thank you very much for your time and your comments. Thank you, and have a great day.